All right, we are live here at the Now Weekly Drop. Y'all know that this is something new that we are doing every week because we want to make sure that people are connected and inspired with these contemporary headlines. Because for a lot of people who don't know how we do it, and this is how a lot of things are recorded, we often will record in chunks of time and chunks of people down there in Atlanta who I love. Hey there to everybody in Atlanta. And so sometimes we have to pre-record. Going live lets us kind of be in the moment. It lets us be connected with you and the headlines and the stories that matter to you. And a lot of that has to do with your algorithm. We want to be in your algorithm. Sometimes we get on here and there's so many things that you see, in TikTok and on your feed that you don't know how it got there, right? We know that there are people who are out there behind social media who are pushing pieces of information. And sometimes the information that is pushed out there just to not make you think about anything, just not make you think about anything deep except for, kittens and puppies and UFOs. So all the producers got together. We decided, listen, let's do something live because we know in 2025 and as we go into 2026, some crazy things are happening. Crazy things are going to continue to happen. And what's important about this is we want to make sure that we get your comments, we get your questions. We want to hear from you. So I'm waiting a few minutes. It's 7:02. At 7:04, we are really going to get into the meat of things. Make sure that some folks come on here live as we bring on our amazing guests. Now, just like it has been always, well, a lot of these formats are kind of very intense interview shows. What we like to do is just have a conversation. Whatever you would say on your living room couch, you're actually allowed to say here. We believe in the good old First Amendment. So however you say it, however you talk it, this is going to be the stage for you, whether you are our guest or whether you are someone who is in our feed of comments. We also want to hear from you. We want to hear from you at the Not All Hood Weekly Drop. You might have some suggestions of guests and people. We've had a lot of people reach out. I had some comedians reach out to me today saying, hey, I want to come on. I want to come on. We're going to do some of that, right? Because we don't always want to be serious in the moment. Sometimes we have to laugh. Sometimes we have to laugh a little bit to keep from crying. And so that is what we're going to continue to do. I say all that to say, you will see some comedians. It's really interesting that often we go to comedians like a Dave Chappelle anyway to kind of tap in to see how the world is doing culturally. So with that in mind, if you are on here now, what we want are any questions that you might have about the podcast. It could be questions about how to get your information to us. You might have a question about how to buy merchandise. We just want to hear from you as we get this Weekly Drop started off. I remember growing up, 7 p.m. So I'm going way back when we had appointment TV. 7 p.m. Sundays was 60 minutes. Anybody else out there? And I still have friends who are live 60 minutes, 7 p.m. Sundays. But here, Now Weekly Drop, we are going to be live here with Not All Hood, with all of our comrades in the community of people that we have built. We've got almost 100,000 followers across all of our platforms. So we are here to serve you in this world where information is so important. Last thing before I get to our topics is, listen, when we talk about information and America's largest export, it is information. So we want to be a part of that process, and we want you to be a part of that process too. So as we continue to connect, we want to talk about a few important things tonight. Listen, first of all, this last week was the 70th anniversary of the Montgomery bus boycott, right? So today we're talking about not only the Montgomery bus boycott and the Women's Political Council. These are 300 Black women who got together, read your history, who actually started that boycott, all right? And they collected complaints. And then when Rosa Parks happened, they said, this was our time. They actually warned the mayor. They told the mayor, listen, we want to see some things happen or else we are going to boycott. So we're looking at what we are learning from the past, how we can bring it into the present, and what's going on with the boycott of today. Is it working? We know that Target recently laid off about 1,800 people. Every week it's something new. Across the year, up to 40% of the stock value has gone down. So this is a big deal. It is doing its job, the boycott, but there are also boycotts all over. So we're talking about the lessons that we've learned and what we want to bring into the present. We're also going to talk a little bit about healthcare, people. So this is a story that we talked about in terms of the producers and just Luigi Mangione, the court hearings that have been going on to determine the evidence that is allowed inside of his trial. Now, some of you might say, but that has nothing to do with like Black history and the Black American experience. Oh, yes, it does. You know why? Because we're all trying to figure out how to pay for healthcare, whether we don't have it, whether we have COBRA. Why is it so expensive? Remember the government shutdown. The government shutdown happened because of the stop and the discussions and they couldn't find a meeting of the minds with the Affordable Care Act. So a lot of people see this guy as a hero. A lot of people see this guy as an anti-hero, and I'm sure that you have an opinion about this too. I think what's really interesting is that I went to court on Friday. I wanted to see everything in live action. That's one of my things. I like to teach the legal justice system and teach people through contemporary headlines. So that's why I went to see what was going on with Luigi Mangione, stood outside with a lot of fans. But what I come to find out is that a lot of those fans were also there, interestingly enough, because they were part of organizations that were defending one's right to fair trial, part of organizations that were defending the death penalty. Of course, in all of this, we don't want to forget that the CEO of United Healthcare, he lost his life. We hear about Luigi a lot, but I thought it was interesting that the fans were talking about very serious issues. And of course, there were some people who were there who said that they married the AI version of Luigi. Yeah. That's the time that we live in. That's what they told me. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that possibly. But speaking of healthcare, let's talk about the norovirus. Okay, this sickened a group of people. They were in the middle of a 133-day trip. I think that this is really important because, you know, when we talk about this, we're not talking about viruses the way that we used to when we were all sitting down on lockdown. Why is that? But in the meantime, every time I turn on the news, especially on a cruise, and y'all know how we love our cruises. All right. I remember working at a corporation. As soon as that tax return came in, people were booking their cruises. This was a trip yesterday. It was coming from Hamburg, Germany. Went from November 10th, made stops in Boston, New York, Miami, Charleston. Over 100 people got sick, all because of this norovirus. What is going on with the world in terms of our healthcare? And how we are treating it. And then, of course, this brings up the question of vaccinations, what that means. And there has been all kind of debate as to whether or not the vaccinations cause one thing or another, always in the headlines. Now, let's also talk about what else is in the headlines. Let's talk about Netflix. We're going to talk about Netflix. Netflix, when we talk about the algorithm, when we talk about, you know, what they want us to see, let's talk about this $82.7 billion deal. Listen, 5 years ago, it would have been Netflix that would have been bought by Warner Brothers. We're talking about legacy film and media, right? We are talking about this is an entity that owns so much, which the question then becomes, if you have one corporation or just a few corporations owning all of the art and the film and the TV and everything that people are putting out, what does that do to have a diverse point of view in the world of movies, films, anything that you name? And we know how important that is to the culture. This also means that probably my $24.99 price that I'm paying every month is going to go up. I hate to say it. Remember back in the day, you could just share a password and it all worked out. Now they're saying, no, you're not the home base of this puppy. Nope, try again. We have been there, had to add on more people. And what's going to happen now that HBO and HBO Max come into the pocket? Now, what's that going to do? Probably that price is going up. I'm telling you, because they're offering more and they're going to want more from us. So one of the biggest media deals, also some antitrust issues. We're going to jump into that also. Now, listen, speaking of Netflix, okay, can't stop, won't stop being number one in the documentary section of Netflix. Sean Combs is fighting Netflix to this day. to try to keep out this video, right? A lot of us are familiar with this. There's this video that was never seen before. Sean Combs wants it to be gone. His lawyers have, said this is a travesty. This is a hit piece. This video was gotten illegally. All right. And this is the video, if any of you saw it, which I'm sure you have, where he's in black, he's talking, he's in his hotel room, having some private conversations with his attorneys, is he not? But the videographer said, listen, we didn't get paid. And 50 Cent and his producer are saying, listen, we got it legally, but we are not revealing our sources. They said this, 50 said this is something that a journalist would do. You would not reveal your sources, would you? Well, neither are we. We are not going to tell you where we got this. So we are going to be talking about Sean Combs. I think what's so interesting is that he's worried about that video. I'd be actually worried, people, about the fact that they connected the dots that he was responsible for killing Tupac Shakur. I haven't heard any of that. I'm just saying. All right. So with that in mind, I want to bring in our guest for tonight as we talk about Sean Combs. To kick it off, we've got Asato Chitu. She is a whole life strategist. And we are also joined by Jermaine Johnson. He's the co-founder of the Brotherhood of Mankind Project and men's work facilitator. I know y'all saw this video. Osato, let me talk to you first. And as y'all know, the format of this show, if you want to say something, then say something, just jump in. But let me start with you, Osato. What are your first impressions about this? And why do we care so much about this as a culture?
Well, my first impressions was I had to watch it again just to make sure I heard what I thought I heard the first time.
Okay.
So why do we care so much about this as a culture? There's always been whisperings about Sean Combs. I'm bad boy for life. I grew up in East Flatbush, Brooklyn. I'm a 90s girl. Biggie, Bed-Stuy, all of that. Love the music, love the label, love the culture. I grew up with them, especially coming from Brooklyn. However, over the years, we have heard these stories about Sean Combs. We've just went through this really expensive trial where ultimately Sean Combs, I think, got off pretty easy. While the legal case really focused on all of the outflow from the case related to him and Cassie Ventura, what this Netflix show presented to us was this whole diabolical, almost evil side to Sean Combs brought to the surface that is really a hard pill to swallow. Where Sean Combs may have been anticipating some sort of return to polite society post his prison stint. Not jail now, he in prison.
That's right. We're on federal level, Osato, okay?
Post his prison stint, right? I don't know that that's available to him anymore. Quite as a woman, as a Black woman, as a woman that herself has experienced things like domestic violence. I sat there watching this Netflix documentary, and again, I had to watch it 2 times, because if we want to count on our fingers the amount of people we're saying that Puff Daddy was responsible potentially for murdering, it's how do we exalt a man like that? How has he been able to navigate through society and effectively become a billionaire or close to a billionaire without this tanking him? This says a lot about what we hold up and put on pedestals.
Jermaine, I want you to jump in. I want just first your immediate feedback after you saw it.
Oh man, let me tell you, all about the Benjamins. I mean, this is Puffy. I mean, how can we not love what I grew up hearing? I mean, hip hop music, he was the foremost guy. I mean, this guy is like everything that I loved about hip hop. Majority of it came from him. So then what happened to me during that documentary was, how do I separate the man and the music? It's like, can I still love the music while not appreciating what he was doing allegedly or not? I have my own opinions about that. But that's the biggest piece for me, is that, this is power and privilege,
Mm.
right? At its highest peak, you know. I had a conversation with a friend of mine about this, Mickey Young out of Chicago. And he said, man, it's funny to watch how a man can go from prey as a kid, right? And become the predator,
Mhm.
And what are those steps that he had to go through that brought him to that space where he's now preying upon people, where at one point he was the prey. He was the boy getting picked on, right? As a kid, getting beatings and people feeling bad for him. So there's a whole thing around that that's just really interesting to me.
Yeah, I think at the crux of this is just a question, and Asada, you touch upon this, is just domestic violence and how we are treating women in society, and how this was really a case for me. I saw it was wrapped up in that domestic violence, because the case wouldn't have happened without Cassie. The case wouldn't have happened without that video. And I think that it was an entree into us trying to talk about domestic violence, but we never crossed the threshold. It was lost in the lawsuit. But I think at the crux of it, that's what this case was really all about. But it just hasn't been acknowledged in that way, which is a shame. Because when we talk about women of color and women of color needing to be heard, and wanting to be heard and believed the first time, that's just always been a problem.
Well, and I see this as a clear example of when individuals are able to operate with impunity. This is how you have people that are presidents like Donald Trump, right? So it's unchecked power and privilege. And so, Jermaine, I think that's just such the perfect phrase. Nobody's checking him. No one has checked him. This is the first time he has been checked. We see videos of violent beatings of a Cassie Ventura. We hear allegedly, and I'll use the word allegedly because I'm an attorney, right? He has not been convicted of some of these things.
Do the right thing, Osato. Do the right thing.
Allegedly, right? Even though it might be fact, of blowing up cars, working with gang members to murder Tupac. They haven't even talked about Kim Porter. I have my own opinions about that. And so this is a man that has gone unchecked. So what does that say about how we put men with means that are able to do whatever they want?
Yeah,
what does that mean for me and my daughter, for example? Right? We should all be very, very frightened.
Jermaine, you work with men in particular. Let me explain this. Now, you jump in, correct me if I'm wrong. You go out into the wild for 3 days with no connection to mankind, right? Except for each other. And you try to kind of like forensically get down to the bottom of why men are hurting. And then their adult men cells try to connect with their younger selves, because that's normally where the pain comes from. We've even been talking about with Sean. How do they fix all of that in their adult life? How did I do?
So it would take me 2 hours to try to explain that whole thing, right? But here's what I'll say.
Okay.
What I know from doing work on my own, right, is that, and we use these little sayings that really mean a lot, like hurt people, right? Things like that. And what I know about doing men's work is that if we don't confront what the real issue is, then we can never get to a place where we can actually heal from it and begin to grow up in our maturity. There are a lot of grown boys out here that are making major decisions on behalf of society. In my judgment, in the case of Donald Trump, that's a grown man. That's a boy in a grown man's body, right? And so for me, what's important is to look at how somebody like P. Diddy, what was it that he went through, right? That created this man, or what some people would call this monster, right? What happened in his life that made it okay for him to do what I saw him do in that Cassie video that made me sick to my stomach, right? And that's not maturity. That's not masculinity. That's not real power, right? That's a man in a silo where people are afraid to challenge him because he's the money man. He's the floss guy. He's the guy we want to all be around. So we don't want to challenge that. But where in real life can something like that happen to somebody's daughter or somebody's, sister, and somebody don't step up and go, nah, that's not cool, man. You're not gonna get away with that. But in that world, somehow he's able to do it. And it comes from a lot of childhood trauma. Even in the video, they showed how he was, bullied, and the beatings, and his father wasn't around, and how he grew up, wearing, fur coats as a kid, and, how his mother spoiled him. So I can imagine in the hood how the kids was treating him in the hood, and what messages he was taking on about himself. So it comes out sideways as an adult, right? So hurt people will end up hurting people.
And what I find interesting in that perspective, so we're talking about Sean Combs' past history. We also saw in this documentary him and his son also engaging in these, I would call them deviant behaviors if you're doing drugs and having sex with multiple women with your son. So we see a repeat of these cycles, that then we should not be surprised if we hear about a Justin in the future repeating the same behaviors.
Well, and Justin has been named in a couple of these lawsuits. I'm just really curious, Jermaine, if you were to take Sean Combs on one of these ventures that you go to where, you try to get to the core of it, what kind of questions would you be asking?
Ooh, that's a great question. So I would begin with, when was the first time that somebody treated you that way? When your dad left and you didn't have or got murdered or whatever, I forget what it was, but he wasn't around. What was the messages you took on about yourself, right? And try to identify those pieces that could be contributing to how he feels about himself today. And what's funny about that is that a lot of what happened in the past is unconscious for him, is what I believe, right? I'll give you a short analogy for it. So I went to PS 36 in Queens, New York. Shout out St. Albans, Queens, right? And as a kid, the school looked humongous to me. And when I was about 30, I visited the school again. Like, I went back home from Atlanta, I went to New York, and I visited the school. It looked like it was this big, right? And so in my 5 and 6 year old mind, right, the way I processed the school, it was so huge, it was like larger than life. But in my adult mind, I can see it for what it really is, where it's just this small building, in the middle of St. Albans, Queens, right? And I say that because when we experience trauma as kids, we experience it through the lens of the 7 or 8 year old that I am at the time, right? So it's important to take a look at it from the grown man perspective, what we call in the work or in the Mankind Project, from the new warrior perspective, right? This is a man with accountability that understands responsibility, right? Core values, mission, things like that. When I look at the same scenario, it doesn't look as grand. And from that place, I could begin making different choices about my life,
Yeah. And Asado, you work with women and men in various capacities, but as a whole life strategist, I know you have set across many women. As you said, reflection in your own life, being in a domestic violence situation. What is the takeaway for women who see themselves in this type of a role for Cassie, who feel like there is no way out? And if we think about it, one thing we know for a fact is that this was a 10-record deal that Cassie was in. And so you are kind of married to the cause in that way. And you feel like, okay, I'm hopeful, some money is coming, a career is coming. And I can understand the dynamic. I've worked with women of domestic violence, too, on a response training team. And you see this all the time. It takes an average of 8 or 9 times for a woman to actually leave and then actually finally leave. What do you want to say for women who are out there and find themselves in this situation?
Yeah, I think one of the jurors, the male juror that was highlighted in the documentary, was a bit controversial, right? So he effectively said Cassie can't have the luxury and complain about it at the same time when when discussing why didn't she leave, right? So sort of putting all the blame on Cassie.
Yeah.
And
How did that hit you? I was like, what did he just say? I mean, I understand people have that perspective, but when you're tied into it, it's not like someone hit you once and
right.
then you can pack up the kids and go. Not that she had kids, but often that's a situation. You know, one hit, one beating does not equal up to, yeah, we can pack up the kids and go. They got soccer practice, you know, how Halloween might be coming up, Christmas is coming up. You cannot, often I find with these women, just drop it, and you don't have the money many times.
And that is exactly it. Her life and her future life in that moment appeared to be so intertwined with what Puffy was going to provide for her. So they talk about him holding sort of a 10 record deal over her head. He was paying her rent. He was tied. She was so tied into him financially. It would be very difficult for her to pack up and leave. And you can see she tried on numerous occasions. There's been accounts of Puffy would go and get her at her parents' house, or he would send his lawyers to go get her at her parents' house. How do you escape that sort of situation? And so, with that said, we cannot place the blame on the woman. However, I'm going to be very, very tactical, strategic as I say this, again, as
Okay.
a woman, also having been in a domestic violence situation, there does come a point where we, as the victims, have to make a decision about our own worth and what we will now allow. Okay. So there came a point in my personal relationship when I said, I am worth more than this. I have to make a choice about what I will allow in my life. And it took a long time for me to get there. And I also want to make the point, I was in a state where I was financially able to exit the situation. And so I think that's a big difference, because I know many women, because of that financial intertwining, and Cassie was quite young, and again, we're dangling career, we're dangling rent payments over this person's head. It's very, very difficult to exit. So the juror, he was very flippant about the actualities about domestic violence, the psychological impact, the financial impact. Add to it children, add to it you don't know how to drive, so you're trying to leave in the middle of the night. I know many Nigerian women, for example, that are in certain situations that they don't have a driver's license. How am I going to leave?
Right.
Literally, how will I go?
Right.
The other
you trying to do
too,
Uber.
The other piece too about that, right? And I hate to say it, right? And I know that it's true, is that, you know, I imagine that in a patriarchy, who's going to believe me when I tell on you, right? And let's not even take the powerful guys. Let's take just the normal Joe, you know? How hard must that be that this traumatic thing just happened to me? And when I tell somebody about it, they victim shame, or, you know, well, what were you doing there at that time? Or, you know, and that's the piece that we always have to keep in mind. Because if I believe that by me speaking out is just going to bring more hurt towards me, then what are the odds that I'm really going to speak out? You know, it really reduces that. So that's another piece too.
Yeah. You know, what's interesting is that there was a hotline that was set up, you know, during the time after Cassie. Like, if you have any lawsuits, you know, give this hotline a call. We got over 20,000 calls. Now, let's be real.
Wow.
Not, you know, thousands of them could not have been right. It was people who were calling. Maybe they had tips. They narrowed it down to 100. Now I think it's 75 viable lawsuits. But there's also this question of people who are just coming forward for money. And then I don't want to get caught up in that. And then what happens often, and this will happen with sexual harassment, this will happen with domestic violence, you start losing your social currency. And people don't want to be affiliated with it. Right. And especially that, let's talk about the Nigerian culture, you better than I, but there is social currency everywhere all day. Honey. And there's that same thing in America too. Nobody wants to be associated with that. It is hard, like Jermaine said, even just with the regular Joe.
Look, in my culture, you do not get divorced. Somebody literally got to die. That's why it's called divorce. You got divorced, right? So if that is the pressure, right? If that's the pressure, there it's very difficult to come out and then relate to people that either you're in this domestic violence situation, there's going to be a pressure to stay, right? There's something that they say, let's go settle that couple. Settle the couple? He's beat her ass. What do you mean settle the couple? And so I know that extends beyond Nigerian culture. I think that's something I find that's quite universal. So there's a shame associated with domestic violence. And having gone sort of through this process, let me let y'all know it touches upon everybody: white, black, doctor, lawyer, working at the Kmart. Everybody is impacted by domestic violence because we have a violent, misogynistic rape culture, whether or not we want to admit it. That is the world in which we live in. Donald Trump, right? And so we even elect these types of people to presidency. And so if that is the world that we live in, if we want to go back to Puffy Baby, what was happening in that time period in which his father, who was a drug dealer, pimp, etc., was exalted, and the mother reiterated that type of behavior as a behavior in which we should replicate, right? What did she say? Or at least what was related in the documentary? If they hit you, hit them harder to make sure that person never hits you again.
And that was right out of Sean's mouth.
Right,
yeah,
right out of his mouth.
I see something from Sacred Knock Podcast. The real question we have to ask ourselves is, how do we engage men in a conversation about redefining manhood and masculinity? In doing so, we can eradicate a lot of the social issues. Well, listen, Jermaine, I don't know how people get to you, but it is a good question. How do you even, get them to the table to actually open up? Because that is something that we do not exalt. We're doing it more these days, but that wasn't happening, in the 80s and 90s for sure.
So I'm gonna say this, right? And I'm gonna read you this African proverb, right? Because my belief around this is we have to begin, as people of color, as Black people in particular, reclaiming the part of our heritage that was taken from us, right, during colonization and things like that. Here's what the proverb says: if we do not initiate the boys, they will burn down the village just to feel the warmth of it. Now, just think about that for a minute, right? Right. So in indigenous culture and tradition, and in African tradition, the boys would come, the men, the uncles, the dads would come into the village, and they would strip the boys from their mother's arms, right? And it was a whole theatrical thing. I mean, I found out later that the mothers were actually in on this, right? But they'd make it this, oh no, don't take my boy. And they'd hold on, and the men would rip the boy literally from the mother's arms. And they would take them out to the wilderness for however long it took to initiate them into manhood, right? We've lost that. We don't do that anymore in the Western world. It's still happening in Johannesburg, in South Africa. We got brothers out there. Shout out to Kole Kile and Duka and all of those guys out there. And they still do those initiations, because if we don't do that, we get grown boys in man bodies making major decisions on behalf of us as a society, right? So how we do that, in essence, is we have to start initiating our boys again, right? And it doesn't have to be everything that we do. I mean, I would love to see that, because it's a very structured thing where we create a sacred space for these boys to become men. And there are many organizations, not just the Mankind Project, that's doing this, right? It's all over the place. Personal growth work and building of community and rites of passage is not a new concept. We are trying to promote it, especially me in my community, because this technology I didn't even know about until I went through one of my rites of passage, right? And it changed me. We talk about accountability. What does that mean? What kind of questions do we ask a person to determine if they know what accountability is and if they're living by that piece? What was the choice that you made? What did you choose to do instead? What was the impact on the people around you for you not keeping that commitment that you made? So it goes even further than that. And to get guys to get to me, if you got any men in your life you know, reach out to the brotherhood, man. Reach out to the Mankind Project. We got websites and all of that up so everybody can get to it and get your boys initiated. And by boys, I'm talking about from 18, from 8 years old, 14 years old, 18, all the way to 95. You know, I had a man on a weekend with me last year. He was 87 years old getting initiated. So
So you're talking about something more formal, right? Going through your Mankind Project program or some other formal program. I'm curious as to what are your suggestions in something more informal, because I've been having this conversation, particularly with other Black women, about this concept of a failure to launch. This is what I'm experiencing when I interact with men my age, and I'm 44. There's a failure to launch, and I'm going to use of Black men, and I think men in general, growing into adulthood, right? And failure to launch from multiple aspects, emotionally, career-wise, financially, etc. So you're talking about these formal settings. What is missing in our current social fabric to assist in doing this initiation that you're referring to? So I don't know anything about Mankind Project. I don't have access to any of these programs. What should we be doing as parents, teachers, colleagues, girlfriends, wives, sisters to initiate these men? Because with this failure to launch, I'm scared for my daughter, and she's 14. Do you see what I'm saying? Because these gonna be the dudes checking for her, and she doesn't launch.
Right. I'm gonna ask you for their hand in marriage.
Right, because I know what's out there. They ain't launching. I'm good, but but my daughter, these are going to be the dudes looking for her. So what should we be doing?
So the question that I think I hear you saying is how do we initiate men without an initiatory process?
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. I don't know that that's possible, because what I know is, first, the men initiating have to be real men. That's first and foremost. How do they become real men? It takes a community, right? I often say that I've never in my entire life, I'm 50 years old, right? I've never had a real conversation with a grown man until I got into the peer-to-peer network I'm in right now, right? And this is what I mean.
By real, you mean what? Just you felt vulnerable, you felt safe, you felt like you could say anything. What do you mean by real?
So what real means is when I'm experiencing sadness, right? And I go into my grief, what typically happens in the world is I make you uncomfortable because you don't want to feel sad. So the first thing you might want to do is take me out of my sadness. And what men do is, hey man, let's go to the bar. Let's get something to drink. Man, don't worry about your wife. She'll get over that. We try to get them out of the feeling, right? Out of the emotion. What we advocate for is what might it be like for us to experience the sadness together for however long it takes, right? Now, that takes a certain amount of understanding and willingness to be able to really sit in grief. And I don't know if you know how many people in your life are comfortable sitting in grief. There's not many of them, right? But as trained facilitators and as a peer-to-peer network, we run towards the emotion, no matter what it is, right? And so that's the difference. So normally what we call locker room talk means if I say to one of my friends, yeah, I made $100 today, the typical response from another man will be like, yeah, I made 125 today. But what would it be like to have a real conversation, something real, something that hits emotional in my body, because this is where I'm recording all of my experiences, right? I can intellectualize it, but that's not where the emotion stands or the trauma lives. It's inside the body. So in order for me to do that, I have to be willing and able to sit in and go through the process that it takes for me to learn those lessons I need to learn so that I become a whole individual, right? And it's very difficult to do that. So I'm not sure that I could say, well, hey, ladies, this is how you initiate your boys. I personally believe that only men can do what I'm advocating to do, right? And I know that's a strong statement, but it really takes for true mature masculine to initiate the masculine, right? I really do believe that, and I watch it happen all over the world every day.
Listen, acknowledge a wounded man from Red 1579. Listen to his wounds, accept his work in healing. Recognize that a healed man will not jeopardize his worth to make you comfortable. We're going to move on to another topic in about 90 seconds. So I just want to close out with both of you and your final thoughts. And I'm going to jump to you, Osato.
Final thoughts.
Especially as we consider power and privilege and why we are paying attention to this so much within our culture. You know, I hear a lot of people say, I don't even care about him. I don't even know spending the time. I think it's important. I mean, I think it's important when you learn about the legal system through him. I think you can learn some lessons, obviously, of what not to do. And, you know, people still acknowledge his ability to have a good ear and to be a marketer. We saw him marketing on that. Let's get the public relations person out there that's the dirtiest, right? So we know there is a lot to learn from him.
Absolutely. But I think what ultimately Sean Combs brings to light is the misogynistic society in which we currently do live. And it's always been a scary time to be a woman, but it's especially scary now that we've accepted that this is status quo.
Yeah. Jermaine, how can folks reach out to you?
Oh man, www.mkpusa.org. Also, thebrotherhoodofkings.com. That's the movement. If you want to email me, it's thebrotherhood@mkpconnect.org. And brotherhood is spelled BROTHAHOOD. So we put a little bit of spin on that Ebonics for you.
There you go. All right, brother. Let's move on to the 70th anniversary of the Montgomery bus boycott. Listen, so important for so many reasons, especially because right now we are entrenched, right, in a boycott. And we're looking back 70 years ago to figure out what they did so we can replicate it. But I think the question has become for a lot of people, can it be replicated, right? We were talking about coming off of Brown v. Board of Education, and then, you know, education was taken care of. I mean, allegedly, at least on the books in terms of segregation, violation of the due process, 14th Amendment. Then they moved over to the buses. Everything was really kind of separated out, you know, just slice by slice, Black folks fighting and getting their rights. In 2025, a lot of people have been saying, you know, but this is very different. Yes, there's some numbers that have been tumbling at Target in terms of the value of the price and in terms of the people that they are letting go. But can we really replicate a Montgomery? Can that ever happen? What do you say, Osato?
Candace, there's so much going on right now, from ICE to ensuring that I understand where my tax dollars are going, because I just see White House wall being ripped down, to women's reproductive health rights, to health insurance, to the darn old price of eggs. So where can I channel my energies in terms of, am I going to focus my issue to be a single issue related to boycotting Target? Our lives literally are at stake. And so you can pick and choose what your battle is going to be, but are we all going to be fighting Target? So, you know, I'm a Stranger Things fan now. You know, my daughter was asking, well, you know, they're selling all of the fandom things for watch night at Target. Mommy, can we go? I know we're supposed to be boycotting. It's like, to me, it's such a minuscule on the list of things that cause me concern. It's not Target. I'm worried about, I literally have to carry my passports with me wherever I go, because dude's about to lock me up because I don't look American, right?
Right.
That's a worry, right? Eggs done cost $27.97. I'm worried about that. right? So it's I think we just, their issues are so vast. And it's just really hard to collect around a target. Whereas, when we're talking about Montgomery boycott, this was a very particular time period, when we're talking about Black-white relations. It was easy to gather the masses around this one thing, right? Because that one thing really was representative of everything. We don't have a one thing that's representative of everything, not in this current climate.
Jermaine, what say you?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. And when I look at Target in particular, I looked at it from like a business perspective, and I was actually really shocked that they pivoted and they did this and they tried to appease this one, and they pissed off the GBTQ community, and then they made all of the people of color. I mean, they just they jumped around and they pivoted so much. And that's really why I think they're in the space that they're in right now. It's not just one thing. What I see is a company with a mission and vision that's very, very shaky, right? Is like, oh, I'm afraid of losing this demographic. Let me switch it up. Because I believe if they would have just stayed true to whoever they were when they built it, right? That, yeah, you're going to lose some people. I mean, that's just how it is. But they wouldn't have lost. I mean, they dropped, when I looked at those numbers, they went from like 147 billion to like 40 billion. Something, I mean, it was like a really big number. And that wasn't due to just one mistake or one demographic. If you look at from 2020, 2021, all the way to today, they have flip-flopped and jumped around so much. It's a wonder. I mean, I get why they're in the position that they're in right now.
Yeah, we have shown through the numbers what we can do. And that's not everybody who is saying, I am not going to go to Target or Walmart for that matter. Or some people, you are not going to get those packages to stop coming from Amazon, which that's also on the table. And I know people who are doing that. I mean, I understand what you're saying, Osato, and that we have so much to worry about. I do love seeing those numbers move when it comes to Target, right? And I know that's something you're dealing with too, right? The whole Stranger Things, do you go or do you not? Because we do see our power. Jermaine, you just said the numbers, huge numbers. Imagine if we all did that. But the problem is that we're online. There are so many, and I've said the algorithm again, we know what comes within our feed, and it feeds us to care about certain things. And if we are not kind of groomed to say, hey, this is the thing that we're supposed to be doing, we're just not going to be worrying about it. Everybody's too divided. And as we've said on this show many, many times, Black folks aren't a monolith anyway. So you might be working on an interest that some people might think is not necessarily at the top of their list.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a number one, even in my household. When the Target thing came down, my wife actually forbade everybody in the house from going to Target. And I was kicking and screaming, but I gotta go get my native soap and and I'm arguing with her. And because of her tenacity around it and her really being serious, my household stopped going to Target for almost a year and a half. Like, that's a real thing. Right. So I know that it does work, and I can see the push pull even amongst family members who are like, well, I mean, come on, man, I can't go to Target. I mean, I'm already not doing this and not doing that. And for me, it's all a product of oppression. Like, if you really want to think about it's like I'm already oppressed, right? So now you want to take the little bit of stuff, and if I don't,
you want to take your native soap, you're not having it.
I mean, it's a real world. It's a real word, okay? Right. Oh, it's already hard out here.
Well, let me ask you, Jermaine.
They Stranger Things pizza now, okay?
right. Poor Stranger Things, all up in Target. Jermaine, did you miss the soap? I mean, I found that when because I haven't been to Target. I mean, since the day they said don't go, and I found, number one, I am spending less money. And it kind of felt like every time I went in there, like, you go into a dollar store, you get one thing. They said, let me just get 10 things. It's just $10. Going to Target, it was the same thing, but not everything was $1. Mm-hmm. And I was spending more money on just things that I just didn't need. And I'm wondering, did you really miss that native? So could you have further gone without it?
So I didn't go without it. I just found a different way to get it, right?
Okay.
Which is really part of my point, right? Is that, I'm kind of glad that she forced me, because she really did. She forced me not to go, right? Because what it did do is it allowed me to look for what I needed in other places where our dollar really meant something, right? Where people appreciated what that dollar meant, as opposed to just, well, it's the closest place, right? And sometimes, especially as oppressed people, if we don't find a way to really pool together in that way, because that's where the power is for me, and I really, really believe that. If we don't find a way to do that, then we'll always be fragmented with less power. So it really does work to do that,
Yeah. So listen, as we move into our last few minutes, let me just say, I see Big Bears everywhere is in the house. He said, good evening. Richard Blackman said, great conversation. Let's continue this great conversation. Can we talk about the purchase that is the impending purchase of Warner Brothers by Netflix? Like I said at the beginning of the show, $82.7 billion. 5 years ago, it would have been the other way around. Netflix would have been bought, or maybe 10 years ago. But this is something to see when it comes to the world of streaming. Let me ask you, first of all, who has cut off the typical kind of cable deal? Which one of you? Osato, you still with cable?
No, I haven't. I mean, it's been years. I have a Fire Stick.
You have a Fire Stick. What do you have, Jermaine?
So my daughter is the one that takes care of all of that. And about 3 years ago, she made me cut my cable off. And she said, can you come into the 21st century? Nobody uses cable anymore. Mm-hmm. So I know that we just have a bunch of the streaming apps, that we use, and that's it,
Well, let me point out, this is the first, your wife told you don't go to Target. Your daughter told you stay off the regular cable. I like your household.
Candace, they're all bullies, Candace. They're all bullies. Trust me.
I know for me, I cut it off, and now I'm embarrassed to tell you how many streaming services I have.
Mm-hmm.
But it certainly added up to where I was with cable, and that's the number I was trying to bring down. And I think that, first of all, that's what this merger is going to do. I think that Warner Brothers is going to say, we've got more. Now we want more from you.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a whole problem, Osato. That is a whole problem.
When you upgraded and your streaming services didn't have no commercials, you go back to commercials, right?
Exactly. Now it's, do you want commercials or not? It's like every turn they are taking from my pocket. Remember, we used to be able to share, and wherever you are now, it's like, you're not the master household of this thing. You need to try again. You know what I mean? Put in some numbers. Here's the code. It's always got me going through hoops just to try to watch a Christmas movie. You know what I mean? And more is coming. More is coming, Jermaine.
Yeah, and that's not one of the things that I'm really actually concerned with. It's funny you bring it up in that way, because I didn't think about it in terms of that. The first thing that I like to think of is, how can I get some of that money if it does go through? Right. So I'm always kind of on the other side, like $87 billion. Is there anything in that I can get, because I gotta jump on this capitalist train, You're
about to become a filmmaker with your phone right quick, which by the way, that is happening. You know what I mean? Anybody look up verticals and all the way that media is expanding. What this also means is that now you've got this larger conglomerate, which of course they have to go through a lot of loopholes, though Trump did meet with the head of Netflix before all this conversation was announced. But now you've got so many media opportunities. So they need content, right? Because how many times have you spent, I know I have, 28, 40 minutes looking for something to watch? Because I've watched so much or I just don't like what's on there, which is another issue. The fewer people that you have, the fewer media conglomerates, the fewer media outlets you have, there's less diversity because now you just have fewer people. Now you might have 5 people, 4 people at the top. Now there's no longer Netflix and Warner Brothers. Now that's one. Now there's one source of diversity or different ways of looking at things artistically disappeared. So the diversity of thought is another issue just artistically that I think is going to be a part of the conversation.
Agree. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what becomes available on a streaming service like Netflix, which already has, I think, a dearth of, Black focused entertainment as I see it, especially when I look at some of these like new comedy specials. If you're not Kevin Hart, like the folks that are getting opportunities to have these Netflix specials, I'm like, whoo-hee!
Right. I saw something advertised the other day and I was like, oh, that looks good. They were like, well, you're going to need Lifetime. Why don't all these apps? Again, I didn't have Lifetime. I was like, really? I remember one of them, what was it? It was Lifetime. It was something else, but I've got so many. I really, really have to decide what I'm going to do there. Oh my goodness. So we shall see. We shall see. But we know that that's coming. We know there are going to be some antitrust issues. And we know that, as you said, Jermaine, when you're talking about that much money, what is a way for you to get in it, to be on the other side, to get some of that money? Creators and everything that folks are looking for in the media is a huge deal. As they say, if you're on TikTok, right, and this is the magic of TikTok, or this is the magic of any social media outlet, if you go consistently, let's say you go 12 every single day, TikTok is going to push you out into the audience because they need content as much as we need something to watch. So I think that's a very good point you made, Jermaine, in that if you're thinking about crossing over and being some type of filmmaker or somebody who just creates verticals, which, right, is where you have the phone and they're creating things just for a vertical view. If you don't know about it, look it up, billion-dollar industry. But this is a good time to get in and get some of that paycheck at the other end, Jermaine.
Yeah, then we can boycott Target more because we'll have more money to boycott.
There you go.
Oh my goodness. Well, listen, before we go, Osato, I want to let you tell everybody where you can be reached. Let's see, Big Bear is everywhere, said, yes, we are sometimes our worst enemies. I think that was just in response to you, Jermaine. Where can you be reached, Osato?
You can reach me at Osato at complybyosato.com or on Instagram at Omuwalux, and that's OMUWALUXE.
All right. And I know that you mentioned where you were from, Jermaine. When is your next venture into the wild, can I put it that way?
So the beautiful thing is there's a weekend going on every single weekend somewhere in the world.
Really?
So yeah, so if you log on to www.mkpusa.org and you can click on, we do weekly men's circles that are on Zoom, so men from all over the world. We have differently abled groups. We have GBTQ groups. We got the group that I'm a part of that's for men of color or BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Or you can join any local group. We have in-person groups. I just came from one today. I was at one. So really? Yeah, this is a really, really big thing. So look it up, man, and just peruse and take what you need and keep the rest moving.
All right. Ken Johnson 5903 says, good conversation. And on that note, I will agree. I'm going to use your phrase, Osato. Obviously, Jermaine has not failed to launch. He has launched. Okay.
Yeah.
And we would appreciate that. And obviously, you have launched too, my holistic strategist. So good to see you both, have you both. I want to tell everybody who's out there, before we let you go officially, listen, Na's going live 7:00 every Sunday. We're going to connect you with issues that matter. We also want to hear from you. We want to hear about guests. I saw somebody say, hey, what can we do if you to have a guest on, be a guest on the show? Write notallhood@gmail.com if you have any suggestions, any people. We've got our first few weeks lined up, but listen, we want to hear from you because the goal of this is to connect to you, keep the conversation going, and connect the dots with all the things that are going on in the world. On that note, we are done with this show. I want to thank everybody for being with us on our first live episode. Osato, Jermaine, thanks for being with us on this live drop. Good to see you. Good to connect with everybody in the chat, and we will see you on Sunday.